Yeah, so I hope 2026 is off to a fantastic start, and that whatever your ambitions and aspirations are for this year, you haven't, like me, already dropped the ball and messed up on a few of them, because I certainly have. This was going to be the year where I kept up to date with my inbox. I started every day with a to-do list check and didn't overcommit, and I think I failed on all three of those already, and we're only about 2 weeks in. Never mind. We are where we are. So we got a fantastic session scheduled today with a brilliant couple of speakers. But before we get there, those of you that are familiar with the Turing Clinical AI Interest Group meetings will know that we normally have an opportunity for members of our community to say hello to each other, and also some updates for the community. And those of you that perhaps are joining us for the first time today, welcome. Great to have you with us today. In terms of main updates, so we'll flag these up at the end as well. Just a flag that the AI for Women's Health super interest group have their meeting, which is in a fortnight's time on the 27th of January. That's at 12 o'clock till 1 o'clock UK time. And the speakers will be Dr. Jen Barcroft and Christopher Linton Reed from Imperial. With a talk titled "The Use of Machine Learning in Gynecological Imaging." So we'll drop a link in the chat to that meeting. If you are interested, please do go along. It's fantastic to support our super groups, and the Women's Health Interest Group is a particularly successful one of ours. So again, that's the 27th of January, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock UK time. And the only other update from me is just a flag that the MHRA, the UK's medical device regulator, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, towards the end of last year, launched a national commission to think through what a future regulation could look like for medical devices within UK jurisdiction. And as part of the overall commission, a major aspiration is to gather inputs, expertise, and also perspectives from members of the community. And members of our clinical AI interest group are just as valid as anyone else to contribute to this. So to that end, the Commission's launched a call for evidence, which is effectively an online survey where you can submit your comments and perspectives on a range of different topics. Some specific questions that the MHRA is putting out, but also an opportunity to contribute just white space comments or communications, and also to upload any reports or files you think might be relevant to the work of the Commission. I won't take too much more time on the Commission just yet, but what I will do is pop a link in the chat to those of you that are interested in contributing. It's open, I think, until the first couple of days of February, so a couple of weeks left. And people are welcome to contribute either in their own personal capacity or representing an organisation, or both. So the more comments we get, the better overall, really. So that's quite enough for me, I think. I wanted to give the opportunity to any members of our community who perhaps haven't had a chance to introduce themselves. Now maybe is your chance to do so if you're interested. So if anyone is interested in saying a quick hello to our community, maybe spending a minute or two telling us about some of the work that they do, a project they're launching, or something that you think our group should know about, now's the chance. Feel free to pop your hand up or just unmute and start talking. So anyone who would like to take this opportunity to say hello to us. And no is also fine. Yes, Lucy, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lucy. I'm a consultant pediatric nephrologist at Bristol and a consultant senior lecturer. And my research is in data and registry and health data. And I'm the renal pediatric research lead for the UK Renal Registry. So I work a lot with linked data sets across the kidney community. And I just wanted to say hello.
Brilliant. Well, so nice to meet you, Lucy. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to say hello. Anything in particular we can do for you, or you're asking from our community, or just a hello?
I'm very much trying to just incorporate myself into all the right fields, really. I'm such a niche, teeny tiny specialty in pediatric rare kidney disease. So just really wanting to, connect up with all the right people and hopefully learn from you all. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, lovely to have you with us, and thank you so much for saying hello. If there's anything or anything members of the community can do for you, do let us know. Equally, if Lucy's intro has sparked an interest and you'd like to reach out, I'm sure she'll be happy to exchange emails in the chat. So we've got a couple more hands up. So, Aizan, should we go to you next?
Hi everyone, I'm Aizan Anwar. I'm a final year PhD candidate in AI and machine learning at the AI for Health CDT in Imperial. My PhD looks at speech as digital biomarkers for brain tumors. Clinically, I'm a post-MRCP doctor and I spent a long time in Queen Square as well. Initially, I wanted to do neurology as a specialty, but now I'm looking at working on machine learning for neurological conditions. But yeah, I'm really excited about translating real world healthcare data to applications that can improve people's health. So I'm happy to collaborate. I'm also looking for jobs. So yeah, really excited to be in this space.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Izan. Nice to meet you. And thanks for popping your hand up and saying hello to us all. If Izan's someone who you think might be a useful collaborator for you, then feel free to drop her a link in, drop her a message in by private message in the chat. Perhaps we could ask people to drop their LinkedIn or their emails as well, just in case. We can see a few hands coming up now. So I suggest we'll take intros from these four that have got their hands up, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Otherwise, we might end up using the whole session just saying hello to each other. So Omkar, over to yourself.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. My name is Omkar, first-time attendee. Been meaning to join for a while, lurking on the email list for a while. My role is a software engineering manager at a company called HeliosX. We sell GLP-1 medications, amongst other things, and we use AI to screen some of our patients. So just very interested in learning what other folks are doing in this space. I have worked at Amazon Health before, worked on like scribes before LLMs came along. So yeah, I'm just very interested to just connect with people and see what others are doing in the intersection of healthcare and technology and potential collaborators in the future. And thanks.
Thanks, Omkar. Nice to meet you. Over to yourself, Henry.
Hi everyone, my name's Henry. I'm a postdoc in the academic respiratory unit at Southmead, and I'm currently working on building a platform called 4C, where we're going to be using remote monitoring and machine learning to try and predict exacerbations of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease with a whistle-stop tool.
Brilliant. Thanks, Henry. That's fantastic. If you've got anything you'd like to link in the chat, maybe a link to project page or something, that'd be brilliant. Sophie?
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. So yeah, I'm Sophie, and I've recently just joined Health Data Research UK as a digital health program manager, working with a couple of the digital health hubs. But as part of that, we're developing some online training for AI for health and care professions. So I just saw this group pop up, and yeah, I just wanted to kind of get as much information as I can as we're developing that. And if anyone's interested in inputting, please do reach out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. And over to yourself, Basab.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Ash Bhattacharya. I'm a radiology consultant in London, previously BHRUT, Clinical Director Radiology and Trust Lead for Artificial Intelligence. I'm currently taking a career break and taking up a post in New Zealand in May. So I've currently got nothing to do for a few months. My interest basically AI procurement, development. I did the AIDF and lots of other AI procurement interests. I think I've done 7 procurements and assessments. So if anyone's got any projects or anything like that, I'm just kicking up my heels for a few months. Doing nothing is not what it's all cracked up to be. That's pretty much me.
Fantastic, Basab. Well, I think there might be a few on the call that are jealous of your time off, but I do empathise with the finding something to do with your time. I'm not someone who sits on my hands very easily either. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for taking the opportunity. And I guess it would be remiss of us to not introduce ourselves properly, because we are in a new year and we have a few new members. So maybe I could take the opportunity to just pass over to my colleagues, Emma, Nick, and then myself to give a quick intro to who we are. So Emma, who are you?
Hello, everybody. I'm Emma. I work at the Alan Turing Institute as a principal researcher, obviously one of the co-leads of the Clinical AI Interest Group. I also lead a team of research community managers. So we actually we're sort of cross-disciplinary, but we help to support and sort of upskill researchers in data science and research methods. I'm currently doing a qualitative research project about how you form successful teams in biomedical data science, which is really, really interesting. It's basically interviewing lots of people like you and kind of working out, well, this is maybe the best way of doing it, and these people have got great ideas. So that's really interesting at the moment, and that work will probably come out later this year, I should think. So over to you, Nick.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. My name is Nick Fuggle. I'm a clinical academic based down at the University of Southampton, where I'm a consultant rheumatologist as well. My research is in using computer vision to try and predict future musculoskeletal outcomes, particularly in osteoporosis and osteoarthritis. And I'm also the medical director of a physio AI company.
Fantastic. Is that new, Nick? I didn't know that one.
Relatively, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, so hi everyone. I'm Joe Alderman. I'm an anaesthetist and intensivist in Birmingham in the West Mids. I'm also an NHS clinical lecturer and a postdoctoral researcher in AI. So my research mostly focuses on the governance, evaluation, and regulation of AI and digital health technologies. So how do we do this well? How do we do this right? How do we build the guardrails that enable safe innovation, being kind of technology focused and trying to source new, interesting innovations, but also recognizing that with great power comes great responsibility, and we can do a lot of injury to people if we do this badly. So that's me, and it'd be remiss of us, I guess, not to point out that we have a colleague who's not with us today, Alicia Davis, who's in Public Health Wales. She's a consultant public health, and is a crucial member of the team. Without Alicia, without Emma, without Nick, none of this would happen. So thanks all of you for the time you spend on this. I think there's probably a legacy hand from Basab, so we'll pass over that for the time being. And Nick, over to you for the thematic session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kathrin Cresswell and Robin Williams. I feel, a little bit starstruck because I first came across Kathrin and Robin actually as names on the number of on a number of different papers when I was performing a review of clinical decision support systems and the role of AI in those kinds of tools. And it seemed that every second paper that I came across was authored by either Kathrin or Robin or the two of them together. So it's a really great privilege to have them join us today. Thank you so much. Formally, Kathrin Cresswell is Professor of Digital Innovations in Health and Care at the University of Edinburgh, and Robin Williams also comes to the University of Edinburgh, where he's Professor of Social Research on Technology. Thank you both so much for joining us, and we can't wait to hear what you've got in store.
Well, great thanks for that lovely introduction. Is that working? Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Perfect.
we can see it. It's not maximized, but we can see your
no.
PowerPoint.
There's always technology. There we go. That's
perfect. Perfect.
So we're going to do a double act. I hope we're going to finish on time because we have a lot of slides, and really excited to be here. We finished this work in March 2025, and we're going to talk about the evaluation of the AI lab, which all of you will probably know about. We are social scientists, so we do mainly qualitative research, and we have a background in evaluating large, complex digitalization programs in health and care settings. And so I started about 20 years ago looking at the Care Record Service as part of the National Program for IT, and then we did the Global Digital Exemplar Evaluation. We looked at e-prescribing systems, and that's how we got into decision support and AI. So now, having listened to some of you, you will know this context, but I just want to take a step back because it is. We tend to forget the context a lot of the time, and I'd like to just take a step back and remind us of where we are. So publicly funded health system, established in 1948, free at the point of care, paid through taxes. It's actually, if we're looking internationally, it's a health system that a lot of people want. Yeah, it's also huge. I think it's like 1.5 million employees, one of the largest employers in the world, budget of 180 million, clear pressures. I don't need to go through them, but it's a great opportunity for coordination to have a national health system. Structurally, despite the fact that it's actually a national system, hospital trusts are quite influential, and they have a high degree of autonomy. But like I say, there's a lot of opportunities around large-scale national coordination through major programs, which is why we have been lucky enough to research some of them, and one of them was the AI lab. But also that creates some tensions around, local independence and central direction, which we're going to go into in this presentation a little bit more. So again, history is important. Yeah. So the focus of the NHS, despite it being really old, has evolved, and that then also illustrates why coordination and scale are quite difficult because of the history. So if we're thinking established in 48 under Labour government as a nationally publicly funded health service, in the 1970s, we start to see the first of many major reorganizations with more power shifting to the regional levels and then increasing financial pressures. Then in the 80s, a conservative government came along, market-oriented reforms were introduced and more competition, greater autonomy for provider organizations, and then an early move away from a purely central command and control model. And then if we're looking at the 90s, we're seeing responsibility for healthcare that has been devolved to the administrations in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, creating some more structural diversity. Most of our work has been done in England. It's the biggest of the three. So, and then if we're looking at the 2000s, back under Labour, there was a big push to modernize through investment in technology. National Programme for IT came along, and an early attempt to use digital infrastructure to drive system-wide change. Then the financial crisis came, and in the 2010s, the emphasis shifted back to cost control and efficiency and competition, and reinforcing the pressure on organizations, while still having quite a high degree of local autonomy. And we're still seeing that kind of focus on productivity, which is probably separate talk, because I see that we look at that as being quite problematic. And then in the 2020s, COVID completely increased operational and capacity pressures, whilst also accelerating digital adoption and looking and exposing both strengths and also the limits of national coordination. So today, if we're looking at the NHS, it's a product of all these different layers over time. We have a national system, we have strong local autonomy, we have repeated waves of reform, we have a long history of trying to balance central direction with regional and organizational independence, and that is really, really important for understanding why scaling innovation and coordination is really, really difficult. So if we're now moving towards national digitalization in the NHS, again, it has quite a long history. Primary care has been computerized for a very, very long time, but the focus was mainly on basic kind of record keeping rather than system integration or service transformation. Like I already mentioned, then the government launched the National Programme for IT, and that was a top-down approach, government telling organizations what to do and what technologies to adopt, around 10 billion of national investment. The aim was then to procure and deploy a small number of large centrally selected systems across the country, but we saw it struggled with local fit, clinical engagement. Organizations didn't want to use these systems that were nationally procured, and a lot of people say it failed, but some bits of it failed. It didn't achieve the fully integrated national health information infrastructure that it envisaged. And then we're seeing the responsibility for digital procurement to go back to the individual organization. The pendulum shifted from national to local. We are never seeming to find the happy middle. So then it shifted to a bottom-up model, but that came with relatively limited local resources and expertise. Emma was talking about skills. There were no strong national interoperability standards, so we ended up having relatively fragmented systems that were poorly connected. And then, obviously, the pendulum shifted again. So from around 2016, new national bodies were created to strengthen oversight and coordination, and programs like the Global Digital Exemplar Program were launched. And again, that's a separate talk. We evaluated that one as well. It's quite cheap at around 400 million. And that was designed to support a leading subset of hospitals to become world-leading places and act as role models for other hospitals to advance digitalization. And then again, from 2021, COVID was a huge accelerator. Digital tools were adopted. Digitalization became linked to innovation, productivity, economic growth. And that then saw the creation of the NHS AI Lab. And the initial investment of the AI Lab was 250 million. That then changed over time. We'll go into that. So, like I say, a repeated pendulum swing between strong central direction, local autonomy, big national programs, and leaving organizations up to their own devices. This is just for background, and you probably know all this, but I suppose the key I wanted to get across here is, yes, there's a lot of interest in AI, and I'm really excited about parts of it. And I think we need to always take it back to improving the triple aim or quadruple aim or quintuple aim. But if we stick with a triple aim, we're looking at safety, quality, and efficiency. That's why we're using AI. There's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of investment, but the evidence base is still very, very limited. We're still in the early stages. And we are just starting to understand the potential unintended consequences in the medium to long term because there's so much enthusiasm. So many early stage developments, a lot of work on technical proof of concept stuff, much less attention to thinking about what it takes to adopt these tools at scale. We're doing some international case studies at the moment as follow-on work to the AI lab that looks at scaling and international approaches to conceptualizing that. Nobody seems to know how to do it yet, of course, because it's never been done, but we want to learn as we go along. There's a limited evidence base, and that's partly because it's changing so quickly. I mean, we're giving this presentation now. This project is now old, even though it's not even a year ago. So we need to keep moving with a pace, with a very, very accelerated pace. Because there's still gaps in, regulation have been mentioned, and implementation skills. So fast-moving field, huge challenges for evaluation. Traditional randomized controlled trials take too long. We just can't afford that because tools are being developed as we speak and they are not being researched. Look at that quote that I've just given there, that somebody in Taipei at a conference had given, and I just absolutely loved it. So we have all these commercial systems that are being implemented without being researched properly, and then we have all these early stage systems that never make it into clinical practice. So it's a conundrum where both sides have to step up somehow. We need better evaluation, but we also need to get these tools quicker into clinical practice. I think I'll just move on because we don't have that much. Finally, the AI lab, but I think that was important to package this whole thing and show you where it was born out of, what kind of time it was born out of. So the starting point, like I say, is a very long history of digitalization. The AI Lab was established in 2019 as a major national government program. That wasn't because of the cost, but it was because it was a big infrastructural program. And these national programs get a lot of scrutiny, and it was very, very high profile at the time. It was and still is the first initiative of its kind anywhere in the world. Yeah. So that's quite cool. It's quite cool to actually evaluate it as well. A dedicated system-level intervention with a mandate to actually support the development and the deployment of AI across a national health system. And the vision was shown on the left. It was very ambitious. These things have to be ambitious. Visions are ambitious. That's okay. To make the NHS a world-leading center for AI and using AI to improve health and well-being, support the workforce, and increase productivity across primary and secondary care. So importantly, the lab was not just about adopting technology, but it also had this economic and industrial strategic role there to stimulate the supply side of AI, to support companies, and to help build a national ecosystem around AI. Interestingly, the program was jointly delivered by NHS England and the Department of Health and Social Care, and that created some problems, some opportunities. But one of the opportunities was that it was focusing on service transformation and also national policy objectives. The program was closed almost a year ago. It's now transition to what they call business as usual. They now have a national AI team, and I'm sure a lot of you are part of the AI ambassadors network, which has thousands and thousands of people. I find it very useful, and that team is headed by Dom Cushnan, who also headed parts of the AI lab. But there were a lot of changes and stuff, which Robin's going to talk about in a minute. So the AI lab was not a set of isolated projects, but it was an attempt at a systemic intervention in how the NHS adopts and scales AI. There was a strong focus on enabling safe deployment in real-world clinical settings, so beyond laboratory performance. Yeah, what I mentioned, that problem earlier, that we just create these great tools that never make it into clinical practice, towards tools that actually would be used in routine care and scaling things that worked. The lab also looked at aligning the regulatory systems with the realities of AI, working with MHRA and NICE. Another core objective was to generate evidence that was needed for national decision making, so including NICE evidence to support adoption and funding, which then links directly to questions of scale and sustainability. And alongside that was a commitment to ethical and equitable AI, designated strand, looking at frameworks to address issues around bias, transparency, and trust, so that scaling would not widen inequalities, which is a huge risk, as we all know. And then the lab also looked at advancing the maturity of solutions themselves, so helping technologies move from these early prototypes to deployable products that could then, and that was the idea, that could then be procured at scale. And then there was also a focus on skills and capacity building, although that kind of dissipated over time. So these were the components that we came up with after speaking to the team for a few days. It's more complex than that, but you have to make things manageable. So firstly, we had infrastructures. The lab invested in national data assets such as the COVID-19 chest imaging database and the AIDP, or AI deployment platform. And secondly, there was a focus on community building. So a lot of effort went into creating communities of practice and bringing together clinicians and technologists and researchers, industry and policymakers. And that included experimental skunk work activities. Third, and that was the biggest part of the AI lab and the most expensive part of the AI lab, were the AI in Health and Care Awards. I'm sure probably quite a few of you got some money through these awards, but the lab funded and coordinated very large numbers of projects, 86 in total. A lot of focus was on radiology because that's where the mature solutions were that were relatively ready for scaling. And the aim wasn't just to support innovation, but to generate evidence. Yeah, and this evidence was around impact, value, and process. So that was, from an evaluation perspective, really quite lovely to hear, because it wasn't just about impact and value anymore, but people started to realize actually it's really important that these interventions, actually we know why they work and how we can make them work across different settings. So I'm delighted to hear that shift, and I think it's slowly happening, that people are understanding why process is very, very important. And then finally, governance. So the lab worked to shape the wider policy and regulatory ecosystem for AI, and that involved deploying approaches to ethics, safety, regulation, and helping to align different national bodies. So these are the objectives. So we wanted to gather evidence on what actually happened, not just what was planned. So like I say, we focused on processes, impacts, and value for money. So not just what kind of difference AI systems made to safety, quality, and efficiency, but also how they made that difference. The second objective was more formative. It was looking at lessons, and that could directly inform the design and delivery of ongoing and future AI lab type initiatives. So what worked and what didn't and why. And the third objective, and that was quite unusual, I think, at the time, had a focus on learning. And I remember the commissioners were saying, we want lessons learned, warts and all. So that was great, because they were happy to learn, and that's key going forward. I think that these calls include that, lessons learned, warts and all. Just conceptually, I'd just like you to to introduce these two different parts. If you in the evaluation landscape, you'll know this, but there's often two components, and there should be two components to all sorts of evaluations of digitalization initiatives: summative and formative. I've stolen this from the Evaluation Society. I think they use the analogy of cooking. Summative side is like cooking a meal and then tasting it at the end. It just asks, did it work? Focus on outcomes, what happened as a result of the AI intervention in terms of quality, safety, efficiency, and other impacts. Measured quantitatively, often in terms of time saved, although people don't know what people do with that time saved, which is another question. Whereas formative is more like tasting while you're cooking it. Yeah, so we're giving formative feedback to commissioners to tell them, well, this might not be working out as you had expected. You might want to do something about that now, rather than letting it play out. And throwing good money after bad was mentioned quite a lot. So formative evaluation is more theory informed, more qualitative, and looking at how technologies are implemented and how they interact with workflows and roles and contexts, and for whom they create value under what circumstances. Right. Okay. So this is the methods. I said already, I don't need to go into it in detail, but it was a very short evaluation, mainly retrospective, between April and December 2024. The focus was on identifying lessons at the end. We interviewed 85 people, mainly at strategic levels, because we didn't have enough time and resources to go into specific settings, healthcare settings, although we did have some kind of leads of settings. So this narrative reflects a higher strategic level in NHS England, Department of Health and Social Care, and some trust leadership. We reviewed a lot of documents, too many documents, because they had already, NHS England and the Department of Health for Health and Social Care, they had already curated a lot of documentation, and we did a secondary analysis on that, and then also we did some observations. It was really interesting with the program team and what they were experiencing. This slide just looks at the analytical framework. It's a framework that Robin and I have developed with Aziz Sheikh, informed by the literature. So basically, things always go wrong along these four areas, no matter what the technology and no matter what the setting. Technology isn't just, technology is about design, usability, and how well a system integrates with existing digital infrastructures. People is how the technology integrates within real clinical and operational work. Organizations, how it aligns with organization priorities and budgets and accountability and structures, etc. And then the fourth dimension for us, very important in the AI lab, was the macro environment, so wider policy, regulatory, economic, and market contexts in which the lab was delivered. So hugely challenging evaluation. So just some here, but basically the lab, like I already said, covered a huge range of activities, yeah, and they changed over time. So defining the intervention for us was really, really hard. From infrastructure to regulation to research funding to community building. We also had limited opportunity for primary data collection, so we looked at this whole thing in retrospect. Yeah, they had already done a lot of evaluations of different components at the center, so we then did in part what was an evaluation of evaluations. And making sense of evidence generated across these multiple strands. Secondly, and I think that is true, that's a lesson learned, limited baseline data for the program, but also for different projects within the program. And also many confounding factors. People are very keen to show progress and then don't do proper high quality baseline data collection. Let's do that differently going forwards. And that made the quantitative assessment really difficult, because we then didn't know what we were assessing anything against, and how we could attribute that to the lab alone. So quantitative aspects of the evaluation are always slightly constructed. And then thirdly, because it's a systemic intervention, a lot of the benefits are still to come. Many of the impacts are indirect, and that is skills and learning and standards and relationships. And they are also very, very difficult to measure. And they are likely to not show up in service metrics. So they're very difficult to measure. And related to that, then also is that that the program had also multiple audiences, so we weren't quite sure what we were writing this report for, although there's a publication now in NPJ Digital Medicine. But the lessons were very different for different people, and in the report we have a table with lessons learned for these different stakeholders. So policymakers, NHS organizations, regulators, industry, service users, every group values different kinds of evidence and outcomes, and that makes it very, very difficult to define a single notion of success. But everybody wanted to know at the end, was it successful? And you have to say yes or no, and that's very, very difficult for academics. And then finally, the program itself evolved over time, and it had very different components, and structures changed. But I think Robin will go into that in more detail now, looking at the results.
Okay, thanks, Kathrin. I'm going to take over, and I will be running through the remaining slides fairly quickly because time is getting short. So, as Kathrin's identified, this was a hugely ambitious program. It was trying to create a systemic change to overcome the problems of AI adoption in the health service, and it sought to intervene on multiple different fronts listed there in the slide. And the thesis was that deployment and scaling AI was a challenge, and it provided ample evidence to confirm that it was a challenge. And actually our conclusion was that the challenge was much larger than the people running the program, but also the vendors and the adopters and health service people and program managers had anticipated. But this was new ground, so it was inevitably an experiment, an accelerated experiment at scale, and so things were likely to have unanticipated outcomes. Not all the goals would be met, and the biggest benefits we concluded were likely to be learning for the future. So next slide, please, Kathrin. So and it was done in a very complex political context, as you remember, not just COVID, but changes in the government, ministers changed, the budget was cut and then it was reinstated. The people running the program, half of them found their contracts not being renewed, and the team got depleted. And I have to say they did an amazing job surviving and keeping on track in the face of governance turbulence. And dealing with, for example, a constant change of leadership and different priorities of leadership. But that is, of course, in some sense, business as usual in the health service. But it was particularly difficult in this period. Next slide. But the core goal became one of maturing technologies and then applying them in real world settings and then generating real world evidence that would, for example, support the NICE procurement agency in the UK. So the big funds, some of the biggest bits of funds, went to deploy relatively mature technologies in English hospitals, and we were able to evaluate 10 projects, which between them had £22.5 million. Which actually managed to implement and report outcomes. Now I have to say, of these, one is a poster child, a very successful implementation where the benefits of more rapid thrombectomy, huge quality of life benefits, estimated at £44 million. Compared to the less than £2 million invested in this project. So this was an enormously successful outcome. It has to be said that was the biggest and most successful outcome of the 10 best awards out of the 86. So most had far less success in getting to real world evidence. And demonstrating improvements, but it showed that there are huge benefits to be achieved. Next slide, please. We received money to evaluate one of these, and that was a lung cancer scanning tool, which was looking at MRI outcomes. And there is already a large national lung cancer screening program, but there's an attempt to extend lung cancer screening to incidentals, to looking at the presence of precancerous nodules in people who've had their lung MRI'd because they've got a broken rib or some other disease. So they want to look at this section of reports where the incidence of cancer is and precancerous signs is much lower. So the benefit of having a tool that will help you automate that process or computer support for that process are very high. And this was a brilliant idea. The tool was well designed. It was a Dutch tool. It was designed to sit within the existing technology on top of the existing PACS infrastructure. And so the radiologist would look at the scan and get a computerized report from the algorithm. And they found it very easy to work and very helpful. However, it turned out to be difficult to implement. It turned out to be difficult to integrate this with the specific technology infrastructure of individual hospitals. There was an attempt to implement it across a load of hospitals, a regional radiology network, and it turned out that trans-hospital implementation turned out to be quite difficult because the vendors, well, the hospitals were keen, but their equipment suppliers didn't necessarily see it as their job to implement this tool. And the tool, although it was DICOM compliant, it was standard compliant. Actually, there's a lot of teething trouble between getting something that's standard compliant and getting something that works. These things are not plug and play. And then one of the things in one of the hospitals, the radiologist noted the performance of the tool had degraded, and they noticed it. The supplier didn't notice it. They noticed it because they're looking at the tool day to day and they can see how well it's performing. And it turned out just a small system upgrade, a configurational error, resulted in massively degraded performance of the tool. And that indicates something you're doubtless already aware of, which is that these tools are fragile in their performance. Their performance can degrade through relatively small changes in the broader infrastructure. And so if we're going to use them, we are going to have to monitor their performance in real time. Now, in this case, the tool did develop productivity benefits, but actually it was quite hard to develop a business case for its adoption. It turns out radiologists work very hard and they're very efficient, so they don't kill many people. So saving in lives wasn't a very good way of producing cost justification. They were forced to recalculate the cost-benefit assessment based on productivity improvements, and there were modest productivity improvements, but the decisive factor was in one of the hospitals we studied, when free use of the technology came to an end, and this technology comes with a license fee per scan. When free use ended, the hospital decided not to continue use of the technology. So it's only marginally economically effective. And it turns out that the cost of developing, implementing, validating these tools is very high for suppliers. It's very high for adopters. And this experience we've seen with this one particular tool is probably repeated right across the diagnostic AI field. And we saw towards the end of our work in this area, we saw venture capital drying up. And our company found it couldn't get further investment, and it was bought up by an American radiology service organization. And that's a third-party radiology provider that is used by American hospitals. You don't get your X-ray or MRI from the hospital; you get it from this outsourced, and they have huge volumes of scans to look at, and they were able to make more productive use of the technology than it seems that the UK hospitals were. Next slide, please. So we concluded. Well, what did we find? It turned out that it was difficult to get these trials, these real-world trials, to operate, and it was clear that the startups who had been drawn into the market by following Geoffrey Hinchin's proclamation that we didn't need to train radiologists anymore, lots of players had entered the field who didn't really understand the health service and the challenges of health service procurement and getting reimbursement, getting some money back. We saw that actually when they'd implemented the technologies, they'd often implemented them with a rather traditional division of labour. They just said, here's a radiologist, now here's a computer-aided radiologist, without changing the division of labour and work. This kind of simple technological change, it turned out only delivered modest cost and health benefits. So as a result, this is probably why the vendors and adopters struggled to develop a business case for their adoption. And it was clear that at this stage, the learning process, the process where you learn to make effective use of technology, hadn't happened. We did see some cases, and I think the thrombectomy case, where it was designed from the outset with a vision of transforming the care process and improving the care process, that kind of optimization hasn't really happened on a large scale, even in these relatively mature technologies that the AI lab supported. So I think we need to start looking not just at developing tools, but about their efficient and effective use and their integration with local divisions of labour and workflows. And the other thing that happened at this moment was that people realised that we need to start looking at platforms for deployment of AIs and for deployment of a stream of AI, of clinical applications. That the world of standalone clinical applications is probably dead. So we need better scaling strategies and technologies to allow us to evaluate, procure, implement, and then replace these technologies at pace and at scale. Next slide, please. This highlighted to us that scaling of AI technologies is difficult, that when we looked at the areas that the AI lab had supported, basically they'd funded people who were enthusiasts. They'd funded startups, enthusiastic startups. So the thing that had driven the areas they invested in were areas where there was a collaboration between enthusiastic startup companies and enthusiastic clinicians. So in a way, it was market driven. It was driven by where the supply market was active. It wasn't driven by an assessment of NHS or clinical needs. And we need a different strategy of identity. I mean, for example, there was very few of the AI labs platforms were targeted towards organisational process and towards the organisation of care delivery. It was mainly on these sexy areas like AI in pathology, AI in radiology, etc. So a different and more thoughtful strategy for AI development and deployment is needed. Next slide, please. So conclusions. Well, there is benefit from national intervention, but we need to be looking at both. We saw the failure of certain top-down programs in the field. And in the UK, also colleagues in Norway, there's a sense that centralised programmes are not going to work given the variation in hospital settings and healthcare settings. So we need to find some way of combining coordination and alignment of effort with allowing local initiative and local adaptation of solutions. So how do we get this combination of national and top-down, bottom-up? How can we orchestrate things together? And that requires, in a sense, a different approach to health service digital change management than we've had in the past. And it needs, on the one hand, lots of bottom-up experimentation, but also bottom-up experimentation needs to be integrated with a long-term view about where the health service is going and what our goals would be. So in general, I won't go through this slide looking at the time, but a more balanced, well, we've got two goals in tension. Yes, we want innovation and coordination. We want top down and bottom up. How can we support? We want to balance between the benefits of adoption of AI versus the risks of uncontrolled adoption. How can we develop ways of supporting things with contradictory goals? Next slide, please.
I just wanted to plug my book at the end, Robin.
Okay, I'll give you time. We finished our work, and we've had a very productive discussion with the AI Lab and its successors, and we're working out what the policy implications of policy and practice in this world where it's AI business as usual. And one of the things we're doing is trying to look at other examples of leading national and regional instances of AI uptake and adoption at scale. We've embarked upon a number of national case studies, including Norway, Singapore, Queensland, and Catalonia, to try and find out what worked for them in those settings, and look at what works in the UK and see if we can draw lessons to support UK developments more effectively. And we're working quite closely with Don Krishnan and his team, for example, on the AI Ambassador Network, which is kind of knowledge transfer, but also kind of producing a positive culture of engagement with AI. And next slide. Oh, you've got your book already there. Okay, I'll stop there. So we've got a few minutes for chat, but we're very happy to discuss this with colleagues online or subsequently.
So I was approached by Vimla Patel, who edits the Cognitive Informatics and Health and Biomedicine series, because they had too many books that were coordinated by Americans. So this is a book on evaluating healthcare AI in we've got a few American authors, but mainly from the rest of the world. So I'm co-editing with an Australian and a German, and coming out in March.
Thank you so much to Kathrin and Robin. Can we have a round of applause, please? And it's always quite nice to have see the kind of, there you go, look at this, deafening virtual applause around the room, as you can see. There are various questions, and please do keep putting questions into the chat. I've got one that feeds directly into something that Robin just said, and maybe he was just planting an idea, but in the work that you've done so far in Catalonia, Singapore, Norway that you mentioned, did they have a different way of going about things in terms of trying to assess tools which addressed clinical needs, rather than just responding to what's available within the market? Because I remember when the call came out, and I guess that there were relatively few companies who were working in artificial intelligence in healthcare in general. And most of those were in computer vision because that's kind of low-hanging fruit at the time. And so that, I guess that's what shaped the successful applicants for that call. But has it been a different story around the world?
No, I think you've got similar kind of fashions. So in other countries have also had. I mean, I think the huge expectations that followed Geoffrey Hinton's proclamation about what computer-aided vision could do and what ML could do, that a whole lot of people were performed. It turned out we were performed. UK policy was performed by those expectations, but so were policies in other areas. I think what we're now seeing, of course, is a big shift towards ambient and LLMs, and there's another wave of hype or driving another imperative. But the need is to have a needs-based innovation. So I'm getting
yes. No. So we just had a bit of interference there. Yes, and it's interesting you should mention LLMs and generative AI because, again, I think that call preceded the boom that we've seen in generative AI and ambient voice technology. Or were there any of those projects that were funded that were in that space?
It preceded them. The call was quite early. It was before everybody. Before it was ChatGPT and everything.
Yes. Okay. And the other thing, I mean, are you allowed to tell us who the £44 million poster child was of that call? No.
Well,
that's fine.
Thrombectomy might give people a clue.
Well, it does a bit, but I just wondered. But I was interested to know. Obviously, the 44 million is a large figure, and you mentioned that others didn't reach that stage. But are we allowed to ask how many of them, say, were above a £5 million threshold in terms of health economic saving?
I think the problem was, I mentioned that the lab underestimated the timeframes. And it has to be said that when the lab was set up, the time frame it was set up with, it was not possible for organisations to create projects and then implement them in hospitals and then use them in real life settings and then collect data on them in the originally anticipated timeframes. Apart from other things that were happening like government changes and COVID. So the timeframes required are much longer. So the people running the lab had this horrendous situation. They had to keep extending and extending people's contract timeframes in the hope that successful implementation would ensue, and then eventually they would be able to collect real-world evidence. So there were only 10 projects where at the end of the project that real-world evidence was available. Yeah. So now there may be
kind of
other
updates
projects coming through, and there are kind of end of awards evaluations. So there may be other sets of results coming through. But in general, the evidence collection thing goal was met was an exception rather than the rule. And most of them didn't have anything like that level of impact.
Okay.
But there were two reasons for the latter. One was that limited progress in getting these things in working at scale, and then the lack of time needed to collect the data. But also, the benefits were not as large as people had hoped. And that was because people had mainly done a conservative implementation of the technology. For example, if you're having two people, if you're reading X-rays, having the computer prompt to help you the MRIs, having the computer prompt to help you read the MRI is only a modest improvement in efficiency. And the thing that really helped them in the case we looked at was the reporting tool that came in with the thing that helped the radiologists write their report. That was the thing that was their productivity benefit. So that those kinds of what we saw was that people didn't try to change the division of labour. They particularly shied away from autonomy because that would be a regulatory challenge and would also challenge professional practice in lots of ways. So we saw a conservative implementation model in which there was relatively limited benefits from the tool, and the biggest benefits were where people had a more radical redesign of work, but that was only rarely adopted in the timeframes because we still have rather little experience of optimizing these technologies and in workflow redesign.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Kathrin, one last question to you before we finish, which is just around how we go about assessing the evidence of the triumvirate or the triple aims: safety, quality, and efficiency. You mentioned that RCTs are a model that perhaps don't work so well because of the length of time taken to perform them. How's this field going to move forward?
Yeah, I've made the controversial statement that had the evaluation community up in arms that we need good enough evaluations.
Okay.
So maybe I'll tone that down a bit. But I think ultimately we need to. I'm stealing this from Robin because Robin's my mentor. But I think it's almost like two-speed innovation. Yeah, we need insights quickly that we need quickly in order to make decisions that are timely, because it can be risky not to implement something that works. But then also good quality evidence for the longer for the longer term, because what we found in the lab is that the really successful projects had really good evaluations, because if you have a good economic case, then you get money for the next stage of the project. So yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. Well, we are coming into land. Can we have another enormous, deafening virtual round of applause for Robin Williams and Kathrin Cresswell from the University of Edinburgh. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing so many insights about this fascinating area. Giovanni, I'm so sorry we don't have time for any more questions at the moment, but do put them into the chat, or I'm sure you could email Robin or Kathrin in due course. Our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, the 10th of February, again at 12 p.m. And until then, please visit your local bookshop and buy Cognitive Informatics in Health and biomedicine. I think that's now going to join the official reading list of the Clinical AI Interest Group. Thank you all so much and see you all soon.